Unbalanced Views. This is the second little story of our spooky season special, and we're going to jump right in the middle of it. I hope you enjoy.
Back to the story.
Back to the story.
So, okay, up next, and here's one I think you're going to like.
Okay.
We have a real banger of a ghost story.
Ooh.
So I have a real ghost story for you. One
Is this one with Patrick Swayze?
It is not.
Okay. Good.
But this is a ghost story you're going to really like. It's one that's very long overdue in being told, and this was one that was finally told properly for the first time this year in February.
Ooh.
But I'm not sure how much attention it really got. So,
and it's a true story too.
It's a true story.
Okay.
It is the story of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops of the United States Army, also known as the Ghost Army.
Ooh.
Okay. Now, the 23rd Special Troops were made up of 1,100 men when they were created in 1944, which you might recognize as a year in which the United States was at war with Nazi Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these special soldiers were kind of unusual. They were recruited from art schools, advertising agencies, and other creative occupations. They were architects, actors, set designers, like engineers and artists in their civilian lives. But they were brought into the Army in 1944 to be soldiers, and their mission remained classified from 1944 until 1996. And then it was finally declassified. And now finally in 2022, the 9 dudes that remain alive from that division were honored in February with congressional gold medals for their service. Now, I do want to point out that to my knowledge, those gold medals have yet to be minted. They've been promised, but they said, whenever we get around to minting them, they'll be sent.
Sure.
And I also want to point out that, like, as far as I could tell, and I did a little looking around on this, as far as I could tell, the 9 guys that are still alive are the ones getting the congressional gold medals. I don't really think the families of the rest of them are getting.
Gotcha. They're not getting posthumous awards here.
Yeah, and I should also point out that if you after this is all done, if you search for this, you'll find some heartwarming little stories, like local stories around different places where one of these Ghost Army guys is being honored in like his hometown or whatever. And it's like, and they're all like 97, 98 years old.
Oh, wow.
Well, I mean, World War II, 1944.
So let me ask you, what did these special ghost troops do?
I'm going to tell you. But I mean, I just want to point out, 1944 was like 78 years ago. So like,
it was a long ass time ago.
They're all like, anybody that's alive is like 98.
I'm shocked that any of them are alive.
Yeah, I mean, well, they're not young. Okay. So the Ghost Army was given the job of deceiving the Nazi Wehrmacht by creating the illusion of fake forces and simulating troop movements so as to make it seem like Allied troops were in one location while providing time for the actual troops to maneuver to different locations to do whatever they were supposed to do. So
they were decoys.
They were more than decoys. This was 1,100 guys who, again, keep in mind where they're coming from. Set designers, like art school kids, architects, engineers, all these creatives. And they were equipped with inflatable tanks, trucks, like Jeeps, inflatable planes. They would create like fake airfields. They would set up tents and like full bivouacs. One of the funniest things with the bivouacs was like they would even like lay out clotheslines and put GI clothes drying on the lines so that when they were seen from a distance, so it would look like so they would set up a whole camp for 15,000.
Love it.
And they would like travel around. Anyway, they had like fake artillery. They would set up these inflatable tanks in like formation. So everything like looked like they were ready to go. But I mean, this is also really risky because it's only 1,100 of them.
Quick question here.
Yeah.
Every freaking thing's fake. What happens if they start shooting at them?
They would die.
Sorry.
They would die. They even like Mike. They even set up. Have you ever heard the term a Mulberry Harbor?
No.
All right. So this was something the British did during World War II. The U.S. probably had a version of this, but I've only ever seen the term Mulberry Harbor. Basically, they set up like a fake, not a fake. They set up like a temporary harbor Like, so for D-Day, for example, the British set up these Mulberry Harbors in order to more quickly launch their amphibious attacks. Whereas the Americans, like Omar Bradley with the Navy, just like, he's like, oh, we'll just soften them up with shelling from the ships. You'll be fine to take those like PT boats, those gunboats in. Those transport boats rather, you'll be fine. We're just going to like shell and soften them up. You'll be good to go. And so they'd go in. But like the British set up like created anchor points and like a fake harbor in order to keep the waves at bay, in order to try and create, harboring conditions so that the men could make an amphibious landing quicker.
Correct.
Mulberry Harbor, this idea of a Mulberry Harbor, like it's a kind of a military formation. You have to do all this work. Well, these guys even created like fake Mulberry Harbors. So like they would create like the illusion that there was this whole like massive landing party coming, which is crazy. So there's a number of different companies within the 23rd, but that did different things. But like I just want to point out a couple real quick. The 3132 Signal Service Company was led by a guy named Colonel Hilton Rayleigh, who was the guy who, whatever, quote unquote, discovered Amelia Earhart before the war. So he basically found this woman pilot, and he like promoted her and helped make her famous. Earhart, I don't know what you know about her story, but she was disappeared in 1937.
She got marooned on an island, and she got killed by the Japanese.
She was almost certainly shot down over Japan, and she was spying. I mean, she was a spy. She had like spy cameras and stuff. Like, so she was shot down as a legitimate target. Even though we weren't at war, you also are not allowed to like send spy planes over sovereign country, and take pictures of their military formations. So she almost certainly was shot down as a spy.
She was alive though, and they killed her. They had her captive, her and her co-pilot.
Well, yeah, that story came out a couple of years ago, but then it was pretty quickly proven that those photographs didn't show her. Now I don't know I don't really know what the evidentiary base of the pictures that they showed supposedly were taken in 1935, but they were purported to have been from 1937. And I guess there was something that you could look at in the photos that proved that it was earlier than that. I'm not sure what, but I didn't like dig into that. I've never really dug into it. But
they've also found like bones and stuff, but I don't believe they proved it was human or whatever. I don't know if it was conclusive.
Yeah, so they did find bones, and then they tested them, and the DNA didn't match.
Gotcha.
So it didn't match what they like Earhart's relatives that exist today or whatever.
Yep.
So they were able to sort of shoot that theory down. But she was almost certainly shot down over Japan. Whether she lived or not is hard to say. I've seen there's some rumors that she was one of the Tokyo Roses. That like there's a wild like conspiracy theory that she was captured and like interrogated and tortured to the point where she became one of the Tokyo Rose personas.
I have no idea who that is.
She was a Japanese propagandist who broadcast to American troops. Usually like was an American, like sounded like an American, and broadcast like it was propaganda, like trying to convince the GIs that to give up the fight and all this other stuff.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, we did the same stuff. We dropped flyers and stuff saying like, anyway, saying like you're better off to surrender. These people don't care about you and all this other stuff. Okay. Yep. And then after the war, we took all the monsters from Japan and we put them in our government. We like kept them in charge, and we decided to put them to work. So,
smart.
Smart. It's like, you did horrible crimes against humanity experiments on prisoners. Okay, that's fine. Can you do that for us now? Same way we did with Nazis.
Do you remember what I said before? You always surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. They took these guys and they said they always pick and choose. They defeat an army in another country, and they say, okay, it's not really worth it. It's not helping anyone to execute these really brilliant scientists, right? Even though they did evil things, let's just bring them to us, put them to work for us. All the other ones we kill. I mean, it's cold, and it's calculating, and it's not maybe ethical, but at that level, it's just smart business. You have to remove the emotion from that decision. That's what I think of that.
I mean, what you're saying is that you shouldn't be held accountable for war crimes. So that's fine, because like among the people that you're forgiving and saying it was smart to bring them in were people like what was there?
I
The
know,
Nazi Surgeon
they're
General,
bad
the
guys.
Nazi
I'm
Surgeon
not.
General Schreiber, who oversaw and ordered all the one of the experiments I remember famously that he ordered and oversaw and literally oversaw was deliberately giving concentration camp prisoners gangrene, slicing them open so that he could then watch the disease progress all the way to their bones.
Whoa.
And you know what he did? He came to work for the United States
No.
doing biological weapons manufacturing and research, and ended up becoming part of like the sort of broadly part of the the sprawling MK Ultra. He died happily in 1970, even though he violated the Nuremberg codes, a thing that
Sure.
the United States, we prosecuted other Nazis and imprisoned and executed them for violating the Nuremberg codes. But we hired people that did, and we kept them protected and safe so they could die at a ripe old age, like in their 90s, because we wanted them to teach us how to commit Nazi crimes against civilians. A thing we did.
It's horrible. It's horrible. I don't agree with it, but that's, if you look at it from just a straightforward business, cold-hearted decision-making thing, then that's exactly what they did. They said, we can't get much out of these guys here. It didn't really matter what they did. They were thinking, can we get anything out of this? Nope, kill them. Do we get anything out of this guy? Yes, okay, put him to work for us. This guy, nope, kill him, right? That's just kind of as horrible as it is, and I agree with you, it's horrible.
Just says it basically just means that if you're powerful, you can just do whatever you want.
Sure.
That there is no rules-based international order. There are no laws.
Well,
there are no rules. There are no and so that's what you're advocating is a lawless international society.
That's a far stretch. That's a big far stretch. What I'm saying is, and I'm speaking for them, because I'm
saying as long as you're valuable, as long as you're productive.
Correct, but
then it doesn't matter what atrocities you've committed. You can be, you can come and work for us.
But that's,
as long as you commit those atrocities for us.
But what you're saying is, but those people, that's a minuscule percentage of the overall group. So you're not really saying that. It's just a backdoor deal, essentially. You're making a backdoor deal with people, and you don't want that to get out, right? You're not obviously promoting this. You're not advertising, hey, if you're smart and you're committing genocide, it's cool, we'll take you on. You're not promoting it like that. It's a backdoor deal. You're trying to build your own, military or scientific force or whatever it is that you're stealing from them. And you're doing it in a sneaky, sleazy way where you're hoping it doesn't, of course, hit the press, for one thing.
Well, okay, so I guess the question,
you're hoping it never comes out.
Then the question I have to ask you, Mike, is do you believe in democracy at all?
Of course I do.
Because what you're espousing is some people making that decision without the oversight of the people, without democratic oversight, without any democratic input. You are advocating an absolute monarchy of certain aspects of the government. You're advocating tyranny. You are advocating an authoritarian regime within the state, and so you're basically saying that you don't. I mean,
what I'm saying is
by
that
saying that this is okay.
I'm saying it exists that way, and it has.
Well, it exists, but it was created. Those are policy choices.
Give you an example.
Give
you an example.
Mike, but those are policy
choices.
Not
policy
if we lived in a democracy, which I mean, I know we don't, but if we did, then the people should have the right to say that is not a policy decision that we approve of.
That extends beyond policy choice and beyond the people, though. And
no, those are literal policy choices.
The example I'll give you.
That's a policy choice.
The example I give you is
that's the policy you're implementing.
Is the investigations into, say, like for example, the UFO phenomenon, right? The president of the United States doesn't even know all that the government has on that subject. And the reason is because he's a government employee, right? He's there temporarily. Those people, the people that vote, the people that make laws, they will never know. There's a part of the government that just doesn't answer to anyone ever. Kind of like the CIA, but we know about the CIA,
Yes.
right? We know who they are. And a lot of their dirt has come to light, right?
We don't, but yeah.
And there's so much dirt that we don't know about that. Like, think about what we know.
But that's
a small percentage of that, right?
But hold on. But what you're describing, Mike, is not democracy.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
So,
but what I'm saying is that exists. That's the reality of the world.
Of course it exists. It is the reality of not the world. It is the reality of our country.
Sure. Yep. For good or the bad.
And so the question is, if these deep state or deep politics actors are not beholden to the will of the people, whose will are they beholden to?
That's a good question. And I guess if you were to ask them if that was possible, they would say some stupid answer like the country or the well-being of the United States or something like that, right? But I think the overall idea behind government agencies here like that is because the government doesn't trust the people, and the government doesn't trust what they would do with that certain knowledge. So they need these organizations, and they have to be absolute secret. And they can't even acknowledge, and they can't even be acknowledged and give information to anyone that's going to be a revolving door, like even the president.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. I understand that you're describing reality, but you're also describing not democracy. You're describing something that is fundamentally opposite from the government that we are told that we have, the system we're told we have. And so
here's my answer to that real quick. My answer to that is to that little piece of our democracy is not a democracy.
Not little.
Maybe not little.
I mean, it's not little. I mean, think about how much money goes to these things.
Whatever percentage that makes up is simply not a democracy. You're correct. However, outside of that remaining government is I draw a line between that, because it's almost like a government that doesn't really exist. It's a shadow government. It exists amongst itself. It has very, very, very top secret knowledge.
Sure. And if it's not beholden even to the president, then the president isn't in charge. Somebody else is.
Correct.
And who is that person or those people?
Well,
but again, I mean, don't you see how this is a crisis?
The president is in charge of a lot of stuff, just not what would fall under their umbrella.
The president of the CEO of Walmart is in charge of a lot of stuff. I mean, but there's still people above them. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
it's.
I mean, obviously the shareholders in that example, sure, could remove the CEO of a company. He could be voted out by the board. I get there's always that, but this is different because they don't have.
It's not. I mean, it is, but it shouldn't be.
They don't have authority over anyone that I know of, or I can say. So they can't, for example, influence the president. It's just that they're secret and they don't exist to him.
I mean, do you not know about Watergate? I mean, you don't know. You don't have theories about Kennedy assassination?
Sure.
I mean, come on.
Sure.
They can't influence the president. Are you crazy?
In those examples, of course. But I'm talking about within their work.
But if those examples exist, then any examples can exist.
If you look at the last couple presidents, I think Bill Clinton, I think Obama, and I know Trump, all three made public statements that they were absolutely looking into whatever alien investigations have been going on. They identified the UAP, whatever the enforcement that they had created to research this stuff, right? And they all basically were stonewalled and looked kind of foolish, I thought, because while we are all seeing things that we think the government is clearly hiding knowledge of, or at least clearly hiding some sort of intelligence of, and these guys apparently throughout interviews, it didn't seem like they were acting. It wasn't made a big deal, but they were asked questions, all of them, and they were all just basically said, look, they don't exist. They don't really have, they kind of tried to make a joke about it. I just don't think that they could even get anywhere. And I don't think in reality they could. I mean, my personal opinion is that the U.S. government does have materials that aren't from this earth, and those materials could be used potentially for very good things in the world. But because of capitalism and because of certain industries, they're being held secret.
So,
and I think that is part of the whole thing that we're, I believe in and you've heard this before.
here's what I'll say. Here's what I'm going to say.
Sure.
Here's what I'm going to say about all this. Like, none of it matters, because here's the deal. I mean, honestly, any species that could engage in interstellar travel, that would have. I mean, you have to like understand, like, where we are technologically compared to any sort of society that could engage in interstellar travel is like, I mean, would be the equivalent of sort of evolutionarily speaking of like comparing us to, like human beings to, like, my God, goldfish. I mean,
correct. Now, I agree with that.
So there's literally no good reason for them to in any way be interested in it, because again, it is much the same way that we would look at a goldfish. Like, neat. Look at that thing. Like, we're so far removed.
I don't know if it would be quite like that.
Well, okay, fine. So okay, let me. That's it. You're right. That's a bad example. Let me say this. It would be more like this. It would be more like where we are technologically. If we were to travel back to 15th century France,
sure.
Like, we are essentially aliens to one another.
Absolutely. No question.
And so it would be impossible for me to share any of the information that I know, because so much is built on so much is built on so much is built on so much between where I am and where they are. That, like, while we might be able to interact because we're the same species, and I could probably figure out a way to communicate and all that stuff, the gaps in our understanding of the world would be so fundamentally different that, like, I couldn't do anything to help them evolve, because I'm so far removed from being able to do, like, I couldn't introduce penicillin. I couldn't do anything of value because I don't know how to, like, I mean, what am I going to do?
Of course.
Now, and they're going to see me as the most, as what they call, the Nazis called what would they call them? Unproductive eater.
We would, I mean, honestly, it would have to, in my thought process, thinking about that, and I've heard of the whatever they call it, the paradigm, the travel, the distance thing, right? So sure. in what I'm thinking is, look, you're right, but in the grand scale of things, the human beings have been around in a millisecond as far as the Earth has been around. We've been here for literally like 5 minutes, and
what do they say? If all of history, the entire history of the Earth was condensed down to one 24-hour clock, human beings arrived in the last 3 seconds.
Yeah. So there are, in my opinion, there are civilizations out there that have been out there for millions and millions of years, more or longer than us. So could be so far more advanced.
Think about how long dinosaurs roamed this earth.
Sure. I mean, so and I know the biggest argument that I've seen is, look, it's just so many light years away to get to the nearest star. But when you look at some of this evidence, that's clearly not how they travel, right? And it just looks like they're using a different type of propulsion, which some scientists are calling, gravitational propulsion or something of that sort. And there is,
again, though, Mike, when we've talked about this before, like the videos and stuff where, like, you get pilots who are like, "Oh, I've never seen anything like that."
It's the Tic Tac is the most compelling.
That doesn't mean anything, because you're just like a dude. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. But I'm sorry, until they start showing me UFO sightings that are occurring away from U.S. military bases,
that's the thing.
Because that's where they all are. I mean, now granted, I know we've got bases all over this freaking world. But which is because we don't believe in sovereignty. But, like,
it's not just us, though. It's every nuclear, like, reactor and nuclear type sub.
No, it's not.
That's where most of the activity is, and they have actually shut down nuclear reactors, like 7 of them. And it's very. Listen, you know me. I'm not a wild right-wing conspiracy theorist. I'm not one of those guys. I don't believe in.
Well, I don't think this is a right-wing conspiracy theory. This is just a conspiracy theory. I mean, not even.
But I don't believe in, like, conspiracies. I am a conservative. I was just saying I don't believe in conspiracy theories, so I'm not one of those crazy conspiracy theorists. And I do base a lot of what I believe in what I think to be very reliable sources and logic and fact, right?
But you're not a very good judge of reliable sources, as
Get
evidenced
the
by
fuck out of
by
here.
evidence of the Steven Crowder video you sent me.
I'm just saying, I'm sending you another point of view. I'm not saying he's correct. I know I could listen to that and see he glossed over a lot. I get it. But I'm just making sure that we have, we're informed and we understand that there's definitely not just one viewpoint here, right?
Well, again, I mean but see, that's the thing. I mean, that's what I like. Okay, so that's what I did in grad school.
But
Okay,
back to, I don't want to get off these aliens. I want to talk about the alien. Why don't you like the probing aliens? What's wrong? What do you have against aliens that probe
oh,
things?
that was just being, I mean, I do,
Oh,
I believe in informed consent.
okay. Now let me ask you this: do you think that Area 51 has ever had? Because I believe it's a military testing site zone, right, where you test out a lot of the latest and greatest
For
military
sure.
stuff.
It's the sort of
But
place you put a Nazi doctor.
But there is also and I know you've seen the interviews, a very reliable scientist that came out, and Bob Lazar, I know you know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I'll be honest with you, at first it seemed like just another wacko, right? But there's been so many follow-up documentaries and stuff that prove a lot of what he had said after a lot of research. And he
He's
has some
the
very he is very
he's the one who
compelling.
projects his mind out
No,
to
no,
other
no,
planets or
no,
whatever.
no, no,
No,
no.
okay.
He's not the guy. He's the guy that was hired by the U.S. government to work in Area 51. And they took him out to Area 51, and he has since come out, and he had written I don't know if he wrote a book, but he came out and did interviews where he describes what he saw. The government tried to basically erase him from everywhere he's been. So when anyone would call, like a reporter, right, would call to check his sources and say, "Hey, did this guy ever work for you?" They would be like, "Well, we don't have him here in the database. Like his name's doesn't exist here." So they would call colleges, and like the person would answer the phone, whatever, in the office, and they would look him up, and they would go, "Nope, no Bob Lazar here." And he went to these schools, so he had to produce yearbooks and stuff that they couldn't obviously delete, and he did, and it was back checked, and they even said, they were like, for some reason, somebody, we don't know who, we don't know why, but someone has tried to literally delete this guy from history.
I mean,
And he goes on to describe what he
it just
saw.
sounds like standard CIA black bag stuff, though.
It does, but he does go on to describe what he saw in the hangars in very, very vivid detail. And he said what they had there, it didn't sound super crazy or whatever. He's taken polygraphs. He passed, I think, one, and then the other one was
That
non-conclusive.
means nothing. That
I
means
know it
nothing.
does. I know it does. I
I
know it
mean,
doesn't. I mean, I agree with you, but
yeah.
it's a guide, right? It's something. It's another thing that you can put kind of as a piece
I
of
mean, if you're
circumstantial evidence,
delusional
right?
and you believe your delusions, you pass polygraph. I mean,
You
so that's
could.
not.
But
Yeah.
think if you think about that in context with, okay, everything else he said seems to be checking out.
Well,
Maybe
okay. So
this
let
guy
me ask
isn't
you.
so
Let me cut you
delusional.
off and ask you this.
Yes.
So okay. So there's aliens. There's this big cover up, which I mean, and it's one of the. I mean, I get the cover up. I mean, I usually understand the cover ups. Like, of course you covered this up because it's horrible. In this case, it would just be you don't want to terrify people or whatever.
Right.
But like,
Right.
okay, so there's, but like at the end of the day, who cares? Like, what is this?
This
How
is
does this add
his
any value?
this is
Or
his point. This is his point of why he was making a big fuss about it.
okay,
Because he said that the materials that they had, that that apparently they had recovered from a crashed flight, right, in the 40s or whatever, that they had been working on and they've been trying to figure out and they've been studying, he said could be used for a lot of other things, meaning
I
it
mean
could be used to power
he
things.
speculates. He has no idea, but yeah,
Well, I have no idea. I'm not. He's a proven scientist, right? He knows what he's talking about. But yeah, he could be talking shit. I wouldn't know, right? He could be
I
speaking
mean,
whatever.
again, proven scientists. There's lots of scientists. Some of them have
He's
really
a
bad
well.
ideas. I mean, it
Listen,
doesn't mean
he
anything.
was a scientist that the government thought highly of to bring in to work on a very highly
I
classified
mean,
thing.
so is Anthony Fauci, and his shop is basically his whole shop.
Wait a second.
No, hold on.
Please.
And his whole shop is basically he's the highest paid government employee we've got. He
That's
is
fine.
A highly sought after, highly thought of doctor who, I mean, if you do any research into his shop, they exist to create to create biological weapons. I mean, that's what their job is.
I know.
So I mean, so it's like that doesn't mean anything.
Listen,
I mean, I thought that was pretty. I mean, I thought that seemed pretty far fetched. I mean, I got the theory and all that, but yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that there is some. I don't know about. I've seen some recent data on. Well, who it was Jeffrey Sachs was talking about some lab leak stuff, and while Jeffrey Sachs can be, I don't know, you have to take him with a grain of salt. He's obviously a very smart guy. He's a very established guy. He's on this Lancet board of review. I mean, he's not dumb. But also, there is a whole thing where like a guy like Lazar, and right now a guy like Jeffrey Sachs can occasionally fall into this category. They can be like the CIA has need for useful idiots, and if you can distract enough people and get them all digging into this stuff that is fundamentally irrelevant, speculative, doesn't matter, irrelevant stuff, and therefore they don't focus on the things that are actually happening that we know about, that we can actually maybe theoretically do something about.
Will you listen for a second?
Sure.
Okay, let me finish. The reason he was making a big deal because if the government and he thinks they have done this, if they can figure out how these things work, right? Like the Tic Tac that you're seeing, the reverse gravitational propulsion type stuff with absolutely no exhaust, right? Then you eliminate the entire oil industry essentially, because what do the planes and stuff, if we can figure out how to travel in that way, which he thinks they have done over the last 50 years, then you would be able to eliminate the oil industry. He also said that those elements can be used for health purposes. And there's all these other benefits that spider web out that they're trying to keep in a bottle because of big business and because
so then hold on. So if all this is true, let's assume this is all true. Then I have to ask you this: how can you possibly say, like, fly the American flag and say this is the greatest country on earth, when very clearly you have a government that is actively working to prevent its own citizens from having a better life? And has been for 50, 60, 70 years. How can you then say, no, seriously, how can you then say in any way, shape, or form defend this country? How can you defend?
I mean, I could say it's the greatest country on earth because
because a country is a political entity. So we're talking about politics. Whenever you say country, you're talking politics.
Correct.
So how can you say it's the greatest country on earth when what you're describing is a gross, massive a conspiracy against the entire citizenry?
Correct.
So it is the stuff that absolutely would demand people overthrow this government.
Sure.
And create something different.
Which is why it's so tight-lipped. But the reason, and I'll answer that question, the reason I'll say that that I still feel that way about the country is because, unfortunately, we are in the current state of the world that we are. We don't have that element. If I'm correct, we don't have what they're containing, what they're keeping secret from us. If we did, everyone would almost be equal. It would create an environment where you wouldn't need currency like you do now. You wouldn't need this type of stuff. Would really replace a lot. Everything would a lot more would become useful.
Right. So again, all the more reason to say that like every single person in our government should be hanged. I mean, that's the only logical conclusion.
You also got to understand that 99% of the government doesn't know about it. Like they might think like I think, but I don't have solid proof. I have what I've put together after watching, and what I feel like in my mind is credible stuff. And
okay, but my point is not about, it's not about reality per se. I'm saying what you're saying to me.
I can't hold the government accountable if the government.
Right, of course you can't. None of us could literally do the things I'm saying. What I'm saying to you is, how can you possibly hold the views that you hold? Even if these people don't know, it doesn't matter. The system that has been created, the world that we live in was largely created by people. Was like the architects of our world are the people who wrote were the people of the New American Century Project for a New American Century, and Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles, who decided what the world was going to be back in the 40s and 50s, and basically outlined how they wanted things to go, and created the world that we live in. There are a handful of architects who have created this world, and they are some of them. And so the world in which we live, the system in which they created, that whole system, how can you in any way, shape, or form defend any element of it in any way if this is what you believe? It doesn't make sense. If you believe this, you have to reject this whole system. Even the people who are ignorant to the whole thing, they don't know any better, doesn't matter. They're still, their ignorance is not an excuse. They're still part of the architecture that has created that has made this world possible.
Right.
And so you have to reject that which has made this world possible.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
See what I'm saying? It's sort of like the whole, like, oh, well, I'm going to vote for Democrats because I think that they're not going to make anything better, but they're going to slow our descent into, into collapse. They're going to slow down the worst elements. They're going to put up a couple of guardrails so that, the poorest and most vulnerable people aren't like slaughtered in the streets. So I'll vote for Democrats. That's my reason. Well, I'm going to vote for Republicans because they're going to make sure to punish the people that I want to see punished. They'll make sure that, that we're going to make sure they're not going to do anything to like help poor people by any means, but they are going to they're going to make sure people get punished. They're going to whatever. They're going to give me a way to productively vent my anger. Okay. Doesn't matter. Both parties have created a society in which allows this thing that you believe. Both parties are complicit, even the individuals that are ignorant to it. It doesn't matter. They're part of a system that has allowed this to happen. And so how do you perpetuate the system? How do you support perpetuating the system? And I don't even just mean like in elections. I mean, like, how do you then defend something even like the Constitution, where you're like, the Constitution has created this system. It's allowed this to exist, right? Like, because it's so hard, hard to amend it, it has made it so that we are so if all what you say is true, it all needs to be torn down. And I mean that in a literal sense, but I also mean it in a philosophical sense. You can't, you can't change it from within. It's way beyond that.
So there's two answers. One is there's not a better system available, so you have to support this current system.
I got to stop you. I have to stop you right there. You're telling me there's not a better system available. First off, that tells me that you have an utter lack of imagination. Because if you can't imagine a better system than what we have now, I can't imagine. I'm
not talking about hopes and dreams and creating your own in your mind. I'm talking about legitimately.
I'm talking about what you're talking about. You're saying these things exist that would end poverty, that would create equality globally, that would create a world without want, a world without poverty, a world without, where needs were met and human flourishing could actually begin. So you're saying that these things exist. And then you're in the next breath telling me a better system couldn't exist. A system where those things are kept under lock and key. That doesn't make any sense.
That system, yes. You're referring to, okay, you're given that as an option, meaning, okay, they release everything to the world and it's a utopia. Yeah,
not they release, system. We take.
Sure, whatever. However it gets.
I mean, if you okay, sorry. I'm sorry to keep harping on this, but like there is a massive disconnect in what you're saying, but like in what you're saying you believe, or even speculate that you believe, and then your belief system as far as the government is concerned. These two things cannot. They are. There is too much conflict there for you to square the circle.
There isn't.
I understand that you're doing it, but because you're rationalizing it, but you're not making a facts and logic argument. You're doing the most illogical, making the most illogical loop. No. I mean, the connection to say we live under a regime that is preventing world peace intentionally, that is preventing an end to poverty, that is preventing an end to homelessness. A country that is preventing people from having better health outcomes. They're intentionally doing those things.
You have to alter that to say we have a very, very, very tiny part of our government that is doing this. That's like a cancer that needs to be treated.
We have a government that has created the situation, has created the conditions
well, that's a different
to allow
argument.
that to be the case.
I'm not going to buy that.
But it's not. It's not a different argument because our government has created the conditions. Okay, so hold on. If tomorrow Congress decided they no longer wanted to have a CIA, could they do that?
I mean, I have no idea what their authority
is
there.
Could they do that?
I don't know.
Is the CIA enshrined in the Constitution?
I have no clue. I doubt that.
Okay,
CIA wasn't around
it's not because was there. Correct. It was created by policy. It was created by an act of Congress. If Congress decided tomorrow there would no longer be an FBI, could they do that?
No.
Yes, it was created by an act of Congress.
I still don't think they could do it.
They
unilaterally. What
do you mean unilaterally? They are the representatives of the people. They could do it. They could choose. I'm not saying they're going to. They wouldn't. But they could choose to do these things. There would have to
be many steps prior to that. They can't just walk in one day and go, "We're going to."
Sure, they can. Hold on. Time out. The National Security Council was created when Congress passed the National Security Act.
That's a different story.
It was created with the stroke of a pen.
That's a different story.
They could uncreate it with the stroke of a pen. It's not different.
It is different.
They created CIA. They created the CIA with the stroke of a pen. These Congress, if we live in a democracy, then then the democratically elected representatives can alter the format of the government. Now, sure, they can't alter what the Constitution says.
They can.
The Constitution provides for an executive branch.
Yes. But here's the thing that you're not going to understand, or that's not going to work in that scenario. I agree with all that, right? But they can't come in and eliminate a part of government that doesn't exist. CIA exists, the FBI exists, but they're not. So, for example, Congress can't come in and say we're going to close up Area 51.
Yes, they can. Sure, they can.
They could say that, but they can say that all they want, but
they can't.
Area 51 is not going to close.
They control the money.
They have no idea what's going on in Area 51.
Congress controls the money. Congress could say we are no longer going to provide funding for this.
Well, that would probably be it's probably in small print in the entire budget of the military.
Yeah, well, okay, but again, same the same
they're not
thing.
Going to cut the military budget, to cut that.
Don't tell me what they're not going to do. We're not talking about the real. We're not talking about realpolitik here. We're talking about potential, and Congress could do that. Congress could tomorrow. Listen here. Congress could tomorrow say, "Hey, the economic crises facing the American people are far too great. We are closing all of our military bases overseas. Okay, we're going to shut them down because we don't belong in sovereign nations. So we're going to leave. We are going to eliminate a standing army. We are going to have a strong navy because that's really the only thing we need because we're so isolated from the rest of the world and we're so defensible. We have these huge ocean borders. Other than ICBMs, we are impossible to attack. We really are almost impossible to invade. So honestly, given our geographic location, the only thing the United States really needs to protect its borders is a navy. We don't need. You could argue for a small air force of interception-based fighter jets. We wouldn't really need bombers. We wouldn't need any of that stuff. Not to be permanently manned. We don't need it because we are isolated enough geographically. We don't need any of those things. Now, Congress could do that. We could slash our military budget down to, I mean, honestly, you could slash the military budget down to like, I don't know, a few hundred, like maybe 100 million. You'd be plenty fine. And I mean, I get it. We're not going to do that, but like we could easily do that. And I mean, if we wanted to, if Congress were so desired, they could do that, and there would be no money for Area 51. And so I'm not saying they wouldn't still figure out a way, but Congress could tomorrow shut down
Sure.
Homeland Security and all of the intelligence apparatus underneath of them and say, this hasn't worked. It's not transparent. From now on, all of, if this is going to be, we're doing this democratically. From now on, the people will decide where their money goes. The people get to decide if they think it's a good use of money to to bomb weddings with a drone. The people will decide these things. And, I mean, that's Obama. I know. I mean, that's his particular war crimes were buses.
He blew up a family.
Oh yeah. They're all war criminals. I mean, that's the job. Like, I mean, it is. That's the job. I mean, it's like, well, it is. I mean, it's like when you, I remember when like you and I talked about this once before, it was like, you said, you were like, I was like, Trump had a drone, kill Soleimani in Iraq. And it's like, and you were like, yeah, that was great. And I was like, well, but I mean, think about you got to think about how poisoned an idea that is, that you think that that's good, because like Iraq is notably not the United States. And so we don't have the authority or right to drop bombs on people in sovereign countries. And we're not at war with Iran. So there's we don't have a justification for that. And, you know what I mean? So there's not like a wartime justification. So like, to kill somebody that is not an at war enemy combatant,
he was actually caught. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was a traitor, and he was plotting with the bad guys to kill innocent Iraqi soldiers. And it was a good thing. It was a good thing.
You can
bad guys dead.
You know what? Honestly, Mike, you can say that all you want because you've read whatever propaganda you've read. You don't know that, but I mean. Here's the thing about good guys and bad guys. You don't know. I mean, like, do you think it's good that the United States funds ISIS? Do you think that's good? Because we fund ISIS and we provide weapons to ISIS. At least we used to. I don't know if we still are. I assume we are. We provide weapons to ISIS. See, but how messed up is that?
Well, I mean, look, it's the classic thing that goes, my enemy is my friend as long as it's against my other enemy, and blah blah blah. It's like, so
it's fine. Look, we'll just give ISIS. We'll give ISIS weapons.
It's stupid. I don't.
I mean, we funded Al Qaeda. We fund Al Qaeda. It just depends on where they are. We'll fund them over here, but then we'll fight them over here. And that's insane. It's an insane policy.
I mean, yeah, we partner with some barbaric type people in Afghanistan. We've partnered with people with drug cartels. Our country is
we've set up drug cartels, and protected them, and used Air America to help them. So,
I mean, we will partner with anybody if we have a common enemy and a cause that we.
But the thing about enemies is that there's supposed to be rules about who your enemies are. The thing about the war on terror was Bush used it as an opportunity to
get revenge,
unilaterally make decisions about who to kill, and not just Saddam, but just like anybody. And every president since has just been like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and bomb this wedding. I mean, like, because I think there might be an operative there, and bomb a school bus. And it's like, well, shoot, we didn't think it was a real school bus. We thought they were transporting weapons. Really feel bad about all the kids that we accidentally killed, but not too bad. We're not going to it's a war crime, but not really, because we did it. If any other country did it here, we would be demanding. Well, if any other country did it here, we would be dropping all the bombs we have.
We would wipe them out.
And yet we have no problem doing it there. But the idea that we're doing it because they're enemies of the state, because they're some sort of, they're not a threat to us. I mean, let's be honest. Like, ISIS is no threat to the United States. What are they going to do? I mean, what are they going to, seriously, what are they going to do? They're not a real threat to us. They never were.
Well, I mean, they were. They obviously were.
They weren't going to invade the United States.
Not in that way, but they were a threat to use some
They were a threat to our ability to access more oil.
Well, they were a threat to our capitalism, essentially.
So that's the point. They weren't a threat to the people. They weren't a threat to, and that's again, back to the democracy. They weren't a threat to the people of the United States. The people had nothing to fear from ISIS. Capital had something to fear from ISIS, from losing money. And so then who does this unelected part of our country serve? Do they serve the people or do they serve capital? Are they captured by a very small, narrow band of moneyed elites? And thus we actually live under an oligarchy of wealthy elites who for whom the government does things to improve their situation.
Yeah, but the people I'm talking about here,
because let's be honest,
the people I'm talking about here aren't wealthy elite oligarchs like the ones that I'm talking about, the secret government that I was talking about. That's just more military.
They're serving the interest. They're serving the interest of oligarchs, not the people of the United States.
Well, in a way, yes, you're right.
They're not serving our interest.
No, well, if my theory is correct, you're absolutely right. They're not serving anyone's interest. They're
serving the interests of the elites. They're serving the interests of
big
the oligarchs,
and everyone
the ones who stand to lose money as a result of. Okay, so this is really devolved, but like, are you familiar with the spook loaded PR ad lobbyist group firm McKinsey?
Yeah, I've heard of them, of course.
So, McKinsey had a long-standing relationship with I think they're called Altruia, something like that now. It used to be Philip Morris with tobacco. And there's an interesting thing about McKinsey that just sort of came out recently, and that was about Juuls, which they've made for Philip Morris.
Yeah, there's a lawsuit, right? I think.
And so McKinsey, like this is. So the McKinsey, a lot of people that work at McKinsey are former congressional staffers, they're former Congress people, they're former government officials of all stripes, different assistant secretaries of blah, 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 and all this, right? It's a revolving door back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And McKinsey recently, like a representative recently testified on Capitol Hill, said, they were working for Altruia or whatever with Juuls, and they created a survey, and they went out and they asked teenagers, it was mostly 14 and 15-year-olds, to rank flavors that they by the degree to which they found them appealing, the sound, like the different flavors, not tasting them, but just like which of these flavors sounds the most appealing to you.
Right.
And lo and behold, wouldn't you know it? Juuls, mint, by the way, was the number one flavor. Wouldn't you know it? Within a couple of months, Juuls have a mint flavor out, and Juuls have these other flavors that were like the top couple flavors that they had. And their Juul is like, well, no, we're making a product for adults. It's not for children. Just like Joe Camel wasn't to appeal to children,
right.
To teenagers. And then McKinsey was like, well, no, we did the survey. They were like, well, didn't you think it was a bad idea to like do this survey asking like children what their favorite flavors were? Like, didn't you, as you're doing this work to create this, new tobacco product?
Yeah.
And they were like, well, no, we asked them because we were trying to figure out what flavors they liked so that we could avoid flavors for the kids.
But then they came out with them.
Like, well, but what about the fact that, and then they came out with them within like a couple of months once they got the survey back. But here's the thing. Congress doesn't follow up on that. They're like, oh, okay, cool. Because why would they? Like they give the appearance of doing due diligence, right? We asked tough questions. They answered them. But the follow-up should be, but then they started making them in those flavors. Didn't you find that suspicious given that they're your client? and like McKinsey is a company that like all the time is out there saying like, no, we're responsible with the companies we work for. We try to be really responsible with what we do. It's a revolving door. So again, it's the same old story, right? I mean, so this is big tobacco again, finding a new way to bring in younger clients, right? To maintain, to reproduce the, the addiction, reproduce the client. Anyway, my point of all this is that when you start looking at like who benefits from these things, you can't help but figure out that like, well, it's not a democracy. It's an oligarchy. They don't serve the interests of the people. They serve the interest of a couple people. And so again, like, how can you support reproducing the system? Well, it's like, okay, it's like, we're living in this weirdo performative society where like, so Joe Biden does his whole thing about like pardoning pot smokers.
Uh-huh.
You saw that?
No, I did not see that recently.
He just announced that the federal government will no longer pursue criminal charges against people, and he will commute the sentences of anybody who was convicted of marijuana possession on federal land, any federally charged marijuana possession. But there's a few caveats. And the caveat is, he said, who are convicted of only marijuana possession. But of course, they trump up every one of these cases, you get a whole bunch of extra charges. You got paraphernalia.
Well, that's okay, because like the First Step Act, Trump's thing that a lot of people are really getting released on, still a lot of prisoners are getting released on that. It's got to be nonviolent. So you can have a bunch of charges as long as it's not like you were robbing a liquor store or something and you got caught and you had weed on you, right? It has to be just you were arrested smoking weed. You might have had paraphernalia.
He did not commute your sentence, so you still have a conviction on your record.
Maybe so.
So,
yeah, but you're not in prison.
He didn't commute any sentences. That's fine, but you still have to check the little box, and that severely limits your. So here's the thing, though: there are literally like no people in jail currently serving time for only marijuana possession on federal land.
Of course.
Zero.
Of course.
In a lot of ways, it's just like Trump's thing. He did this only on it's a federal, only at the federal level, and that affects a significantly small number of people. It's at the state level is where the problem is. Most people are arrested at state level. And so Biden does this, he's going to commute all these sentences. Now, there are people who are out whose sentences will now be commuted. They no longer have to check the box. That will be a material improvement for their lives. But most people don't have just marijuana convictions when they're caught with weed. Plus, it's only on federal land. So it's basically like just the random people who got caught, like, I don't know, at like smoking a joint at Yellowstone. Like, they're the only ones that really this affect, what I mean? Like on federal land, like, and in DC, I guess everybody in DC, because that's federal land. So it's like the big promise with little delivery. And Trump's thing about no violent crime thing, it's the same deal. Because it's only federal, it's only on, so that means only on something that only occurred on federal land. And you're not even commuting sentences. Yeah, it's keeping some people out of prison, but it's not much. It doesn't do very much of anything. And that's the point. It's the performance so that it looks like you're doing something without doing a thing.
I mean,
and
all those prisoners that are being released are definitely going to disagree with you. So it's been 14.
I'm not saying it's not
14,000 individuals in our federal prison system have been released or had their sentences reduced. More than 61,000 now qualify to earn credits towards reducing their sentence. So I'm seeing, because I watched the podcast of these prisoners that used to be in prison. Some of them are filing paperwork for prisoners as in-house attorneys to get them released under the First Step Act, and they are saying how they didn't have a chance. Some of these are lifers. Robert Rosser's one. He's serving life, no parole, and he was released under this First Step Act. And he's now doing a podcast where he's talking about other inmates that are not only getting released, but also having 5-10 years knocked off, so they're actually going to get home, see their family, and have some sort of a life. That's an amazing thing. And no one else has done that. Like, no one. People have talked, but no one has done anything quite like this. And it's a very democratic thing to do. This isn't a Republican thing to do, for sure.
No, look here. Absolutely. I don't want to take away. Like, absolutely. It is a good thing. No question, it is a good thing. Although obviously there are things that you can quibble about, like it reduces, didn't it do, I think it reduced the disparity between crack and cocaine, powder cocaine, but it didn't eliminate it, which is like kind of still messed up. Like there should be no disparity. Like because again, whatever. So, but whatever. Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It was passed in a bipartisan way, which, I don't know, whatever. Everybody likes to celebrate that. I don't quite care. I don't care about bipartisanship. I mean, I'm like, what's the point of being in power if like you only care about bipartisanship? It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. I mean, like that's not how power works. You have power to use power, and Democrats are the worst at this. They like desperately want Republicans to be their friends, and Republicans like desperately want celebrities to like them. So there's like a weird thing. Yes. Okay. Fine. I'm not going to. It was a great thing. That for sure. It's a good. Well, good.
Make sure
thing.
You don't.
I mean, I don't think it's anywhere near where it needs to be.
Don't you edit that out? You just said. Make sure that stays in.
That what? It was a good thing, a great thing, or whatever. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for all the people that are impacted. It's nowhere near where we need to be, but yeah, of course it's good. And I wasn't trying to like for the people that it affects. Sure, the material improvement to their lives.
More work to do.
And for the people whose
more work to do.
And for the people whose sentences get commuted, good for them. That is a good thing. I mean, and no question, it's a good thing. But my point was just that they're all like half measures, though. These are all like tweaks around the edges, and doing tweaks around the edges, I have found typically just provides cover to not do anything else for years. And that's the problem. Like you do a little tweak around the edges and they're like, all right, well, we've covered that. So we don't have to think about this for a few years. And it's like, well, no, like the whole idea, like for the American people, most people are like, good, that's a good first step.
Mm-hmm. That's why it's called the First Step Act.
But then Congress says, well, we did it. We solved it. We're done. Anyway, back to this stupid story that I was trying to do about the Ghost Army.
Oh, that wasn't the story?
We've just been talking. So anyway, so these guys, all right, so back to the Ghost Army. Forget all this other bullshit. Who cares about fucking aliens? So these guys did like crazy stuff. Like they would put they had these like 500-pound speakers that they mounted on the back of half track. You know what half tracks are?
I don't know.
I'm sure you've seen them. So half tracks are those like those big like armored vehicles that have like two wheels in the front, but then the back has like a track, like a tank.
Oh yeah.
So they're like a half track, okay. So they put them on the back of these huge half tracks, and they would drive them around, and they had these like all these pre-recorded sounds. They used what was called wire tape, like these, which was like state of the art. Mm-hmm. It was the wire recording rather, which was the precursor to using like actual like tape. So before they even had tape, this was like nobody, like no civilians like knew this existed. This was something created by like in the DOD.
Right.
And Department of War actually still. But anyways, they were using this like this wire recording, state of the art wire recording, and you could hear the sound up to 15 miles away. So what I like, the only reason I sort of point this out, one of the things I really like about this was like the sounds that they had like fake troop sounds that they would play on these speakers and kind of drive them around their fake camp. And they would have like vehicle noises and they would have, all kinds of like troop movement noises. But then they actually like made sure to record like guys yelling things like, get over here, and like doing like soldier sounds, like cursing and doing stuff just like so that it would sound realistic, which is great. I mean, like this was an elaborate ruse, right? So then, like I said, these 1,100 men created the illusion there were like 15,000 of them there. And they even set up fake radio signals. So they would have like conversations going back on like radio between soldiers that were all like completely faked. They even did like fake Morse code operators, which doesn't sound like a big deal, except that every Morse code operator had their own like way of sending Morse code.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to prevent the Nazis from realizing that it was a different Morse code operator than because what they would, a lot of times they would do is they would send in some regular troops, like an advanced group that were real to come in. And then they would come in behind them and set up this massive, you know what I mean? So there'd be like an advanced reconnaissance group would come in and set stuff up so that the Nazis would see troops were coming into the area. That's how you do it. You send in a recon unit to sort of set up the perimeter, and then the rest of the force would move in. So they would do the same thing, but all fake. So they would send in real guys, real soldiers to do like the perimeter, and then they would go wherever they were supposed to go while the fake team moved in.
Gotcha.
And then like, so they would actually like master the way Morse code operators sent Morse code so that they could mimic precisely how they sent Morse code and then send fake signals that they, thought might be getting intercepted.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even know if they were getting intercepted, but they did it just in case, which is just amazing. Anyway, since their mission was declassified in 1996, the Ghost Army Legacy Project has been trying to get these men recognized for their contribution to the war effort. One of the guys, actually, there were a couple of like famous artists, but one guy I thought was interesting that was in this unit was you might have heard of. His name was Bill Blass.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
I've worn some of his stuff before.
Fashion designer.
Yeah.
Bill Blass. He's one of them.
I like his stuff. Good stuff. I like it.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, so they've been trying to get the Ghost Army recognized since 1996. So, just 26 years later.
Before they all turn into ghosts.
Now that there are 26 years later. So a lot of these guys are like 97, 98 of the 9 that survived. So they would have been the ones that survived. Let's see. So 26 years ago would have been what, 72? So I bet it would have been I bet it was probably a couple hundred of them. 72 years old. I bet a few hundred were still alive, right?
Sure.
But anyway, when they first were declassified. So anyway, now there's only 9. Congress thought it was a good idea to follow through and go ahead and, acknowledge them. I guess Congress basically figured we can afford 9 gold coins. We can't do more than 10, but we'll do 9.
We'll do 9.
So as soon as we get to 9, we'll do this thing. So to connect this back to our theme here, what are you doing? You're very distracting.
What do you mean? Can you see me jumping around?
You're all over the place. So
no one can see me.
I can. So, and I'm not scripted.
I'm by the bridge.
I have like
Can't
a couple
you see?
little.
Look, I'm sitting by the bridge. I'm just watching traffic.
Look here. Look. I have bullet points here. I have like an outline written. I don't have a script. So like I'm watching you most of the time.
See, I'm used to you not watching me. I can sit here by the bridge and just. It's getting chilly out here.
I know, but
it really is.
It's very different when I can see what you're doing. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you know this, but like in movies, in TV shows, movies, or whatever, novels, ghosts are, like most supernatural things, ghosts serve a dual role when you use them. They are, usually, they're whatever they are for the story, to move the story forward. But generally speaking, ghosts are used as a metaphor for memories of the past. Obviously, that is what they are. In the same way that zombies are a stand-in for mindless consumption, ghosts are a stand-in for, memories.
Yeah.
And so, because I think, ghosts are recognized as a metaphor, I think calling these guys the Ghost Army is really apropos. Recognizing them now that they're almost all gone, some 25 years after their mission was declassified, is like the perfect metaphor for how this country treats its veterans. We forget them unless we can do some sort of performative thing and get the press to run a bunch of like cloying little puff pieces that celebrate the too little, too late action that our government performatively took to like award these 9 guys a gold coin. And they didn't even have the coins minted yet. They were like, we'll get them to you once we mint them.
It's a backlog.
Like, I mean,
we have a backlog on this stuff right
97, 98 years old. How many of them are going to survive?
Right.
Anyway, just performative government nonsense, but still, I think these guys were really cool and deserve recognition. Despite my pacifist leanings, I think these guys were really cool. And I just want to say, there's nothing spookier than government indifference for the people that do its bidding. Ooh. All right. And Mike, that is where we will stop our story for the night.
Okay, cool.
Hey, Unbalanced listeners. Thanks so much. If you made it this far, good God, I'm sorry. What a rambling mess that was. Happy Halloween. I'm recording this on October 31st. We will be back in just a few days with part 3 of the Pox Upon Your House series. I'm sorry for the delay. We had some unforeseen difficulties. But in the meantime, feel free to contact us at Views Unbalanced on Twitter or email us at unbalancedviews@gmail.com. And we'll be talking to you very, very soon. Thank you so much. Please spread the word if you like what we're doing.